Okay, Genesis chapter 33, verses 20 through 20. 12 through 20. Genesis 33, verses 12 through the end of the chapter is today's meditation. Then Esau said, "Let us be on our way. I will accompany you." But Jacob said to him, "My Lord knows that the children are tender, and that I must care for the ewes and cows that are nursing their young. If they are driven hard just one day, all the animals will die. So let my Lord go on ahead of his servant while I move along slowly at the pace of the droves before me and that of the children until I come to my Lord in Seir." Esau said, "Then let me leave some of my men with you." "But why do that?" Jacob asked. "Just let me find favor in the eyes of my Lord." So that day Esau started on his way back to Seir. Jacob, however, went to Sukkot, where he built a place for himself and made shelters for his livestock. That is why the place is called Sukkot. After Jacob came from Paddan Aram, he arrived safely at the city of Shechem in Canaan and camped within the sight of the city. For 100 pieces of silver he bought from the sons of Hamor, the father of Shechem, the plot of ground where he pitched his tent. There he set up an altar and called it El Elohe Israel. Amen. Okay, context for the passage today. We already had this scene in chapter 33 where Jacob meets his brother Esau, and they make reconciliation. And what's really happening here is Esau is telling Jacob, "Hey, let's go to Seir." That's where Esau lives, by the way. It's in the land of Edom. Okay? And Jacob says, no, go ahead. The children are still young. We can't really keep up at your pace. And even our livestock, we have some young flocks. So you, brother Esau, you go ahead and we'll catch up. Okay, we'll go at our pace and we'll meet you at Seir. And that's what's happening here. And then Esau's like, okay, that's fine. Then let me leave some of my people with you to help you. And Jacob's like, no, it's okay. Don't worry about me. Just go ahead. As long as we're good, that's all I'm happy about. So you go ahead. And so Esau says, all right, I'll see you in Seir. And he leaves. And then Jacob, he ends up not going to Seir. He goes to Sukkot. And he ends up building shelters there. And then he goes to Shechem. And then that's where he kind of starts his new life. Okay? So that's what's happening in the text. But we'll go into it a little bit more to understand all of it. Okay? All right, so let's set things up. We know from last week, Jacob left Laban, and so that was all settled. And so in chapter 32, what happened was, remember, Jacob is, and let me give you some geography, okay? Guys, Haran is where Jacob's come from. Remember, that's where Laban was. Paddan Aram, we see in verse 18. He's coming from Paddan Aram. Paddan Aram is right by where Haran is. It's where he was, his mom's home, where Laban was. Okay, so that's home, right? That's like northwest, let's call it. Okay, Canaan is basically south of where Haran is. You got to come all the way down. So basically, Jacob left Laban. He's coming back to Canaan. All right, and these places like Sukkot, Shechem, they're all in Canaan. That's where Jacob is supposed to settle. Right? In fact, Jacob left Laban's house because God told him to go back. So in chapter 31, verse 3, right, God told Jacob, go back now to your land, to the land of your fathers. Okay? So remember, Jacob had left Canaan to go back home because of the whole Esau situation. And he had the whole thing with Laban, and that's where he got married, that's where he had kids. But then at one point in chapter 31, verse 3, God said, go back to Canaan now. Just as God promised, and just as God had told Jacob would happen, that he would eventually return to Canaan, and God will give him the land, and same promise, right? Same promise along with Abraham, Isaac. So Jacob has left Haran, or Padan Aram, right? And is going to Canaan, okay? That's his journey. Now in chapter 32, what happened was, on his way to Canaan, guess who he has to make reconciliation with? Well, think about the reason why he left Canaan in the first place. The reason why he left Canaan in the first place was because Esau was trying to kill Jacob. So now that he's going back to Jacob, there's only one, not that he's going back to Canaan, there's only one thing on Jacob's mind. Esau. Right? And now he's not alone, he has his family, and he's wealthy, and he has servants. But that doesn't mean that he's not afraid of Esau. Okay? Because by now Esau has family, and he's grown in numbers as well. And so, one thing is on his mind, now that the whole issue with Laban is settled, and he's now just going back to Canaan comfortably. It's not so comfortable because Esau's on his mind. So what happened in chapter 32 was, he actually sends messengers ahead to Esau and telling Esau, I'm coming. Okay, that's exactly what Jacob does. And then the messages come back, and the message that they bring back is, Esau's coming to meet you. Now, by this time, Esau's not living in Canaan. He's living in a place called Edom, right? And specifically in the land of Seir. It's not in Canaan. He moves southern. Edom is more south of where Canaan is, all right? So, after sending messages to Esau in chapter 32, Esau sends back a message and says, Jacob, don't come all the way down. I'm going to meet you in the middle. I'm going to go. And so what's happening is, Jacob is moving down from Padan Aram to Canaan, and Esau's living in Seir. But then Esau says, I'm going to go meet you too. So Esau's now coming up to meet Jacob, and that's what's happening. So Jacob's traveling down south, and Esau's traveling up north. That's what's happening. And so in chapter 32, Jacob gets ready. The first thing he does is he prays to God. Right? He prays a lot. He's really afraid. And we'll look up some of these verses. Chapter 32, verse 7. In great fear and distress, Jacob divided the people who were with him into two groups, in the flocks, and the herds and camels as well. He thought if Esau comes and attacks one group, the group that is left may escape. He comes up with the strategy, just in case Esau's still wanting to kill him. We're going to make two groups. In the first group, he's going to give like a lot of gifts. In the second group, he's going to have his family. So just in case Esau's still angry, if Esau sees the gifts, maybe he'll open his heart. And if Esau says, I'm going to kill them anyway, while Esau is attacking the first group, Jacob will run away. That's Jacob's strategy. Okay? And then in verse 9, he prays to God, right? Then Jacob prayed, O God of my father Abraham, God of my father Isaac, O Lord, who said to me, go back to your country and your relatives, and I will make it prosper. And he goes on. And if you look in verse 11, save me, I pray, from the hand of my brother Esau, for I am afraid he will come and attack me, and also the mothers with their children. But you have said, I will surely make you prosper, and will make your descendants like the sand of the sea, which cannot be counted. Okay, so what's happening here is, he's afraid of Esau, because he has to meet him, and he's coming up with his own strategy, and he prays because he's very afraid. That's what's going on in chapter 32. Now, at the end of chapter 32, we know clearly what his plan is, right? Verse 20. And be sure to say, your servant Jacob is coming behind us, for he thought, I will pacify him with these gifts I'm sending on ahead. Later, when I see him, perhaps he will receive me. So Jacob's gifts went ahead of him, but he himself spent the night in the camp. Now, we all know what happens. So he sends this group, first group ahead, and it's gifts. And he's saying, maybe if Esau looks at these gifts, he's going to kind of forgive you. Okay? Now, we all know what happened during the night, though. The famous Jacob wrestling with God, where he says, I'm not going to let you go until you bless me. And that's exactly what happens. He gets blessed, and his name changes. His name changes from His name changes from Jacob to Israel. Jacob meaning the deceiver, and now what does his name mean? Israel? Struggling with God. He struggles with God. Okay? Because he wrestled with God. Now isn't that interesting? Because even as he's praying about Esau, what is Jacob doing? He's actually coming up with his own plan. Okay? So, even as he's trying to make reconciliation with Esau, if you look at the way Jacob is working, he's still using his very sneaky kind of plan. Okay? Although he's praying for God to help him out. Right? So you got these gifts going ahead of him, hoping that these gifts will kind of soften Esau's heart, and he's depending on that. But right now, really, it doesn't matter if you're in group 1 or group 2. It doesn't matter if the gifts are there. You need to, it's all up to God. And so what happens is during this wrestling with God, I think something changes with Jacob where he realizes that right now, if he doesn't want to be killed by Esau, you have to just cling to God. And that's it. And so your name is no longer deceiver, or the one who deceives. Your name is the one who struggles with God. Now, let me tell you, the struggle with God, you have to understand that it's the person of faith, the one who struggles with God. Israel meaning struggling with God. The one who is in relationship with God, the one who wrestles with God. It's actually a good thing. The one who seeks God's will. It's not always an easy thing to pray and to seek God, because think about it. You're going to meet your brother, he might kill you, and you just prayed and you don't know what's going to happen. You have to trust in God. That's why it's wrestling with God. Okay? So that's what happens at night. He wrestles with God. He doesn't necessarily win. He gets the blessing, but his hip socket is totally broken. Okay? So it's this very interesting thing that happens overnight, which we can interpret in so many ways, but I think the last thing, it's wrong to interpret that it was an angel, because I don't think it is an angel. And I think it's too far-fetched to interpret that it's Jesus, because Jesus isn't born yet. And so we use this very theological term, pre-incarnate Jesus, but that's not what the Bible says. The Bible doesn't say pre-incarnate Jesus. The Bible says a man wrestled with him. So we know that it wasn't an angel, okay? And we can't really assume it's Jesus, because Jesus isn't born until Matthew chapter 1. So we can call him the pre-incarnate Jesus because we know that this is God, but that's our assumption. We can't really label it because the Bible doesn't say that this is pre-incarnate Jesus. But we know that it's not an angel. We know that it's God. Because what does it say here? You struggle with God and with men and have overcome, right? And then what does he name the place? I'm at verse 30, by the way, chapter 32. He actually names the place Peniel, which means, it is because I saw God face to face, and yet my life was spared. So who did he wrestle with? It wasn't an angel, it was God. Now, similar, in Daniel, when Daniel's 3 friends are thrown into the furnace, who comes and rescues Daniel? Some man, some human figure. It wasn't an angel, and again, we can't just assume and use the word pre-incarnate Jesus, but it's God. So what I mean by pre-incarnate Jesus is, it's not Jesus yet, because Jesus isn't born, but it is somehow God in human form, but not an angel. Okay, that's why even when Abraham, remember the visitors who visited Abraham, and was once again confirming about Isaac's birth, the 3 men who visited, they weren't angels, they were men. But then later on, as God is speaking to them, he's speaking with the Lord. So who was it? So I think we're looking at the same kind of man. Okay? But without going into that too much, what's happening there during the night is Jacob is wrestling with God. And he is renamed. Okay? Okay, so after that night, group one's already gone. Jacob takes his family, he's going in group two, and he meets Esau, right? And so now I'm at chapter 33. Esau's like, whoa, who are these kids? They're my family. He's really happy. What are these things you set ahead of me? Oh, and I'm at verse 8 now. What do you mean by these droves I met? To find favor in your eyes, my Lord. And Esau's like, no, I have enough, you keep it. And Jacob's like, no, I want you to take it. And then look what he says in verse 10. After he insists Esau to take the gift, for to see your face is like seeing the face of God, now that you have received me favorably. Please accept the present that was brought to you, for God has been gracious to me, and I have all I need. And because Jacob insisted, Esau accepted. Okay? So as they make reconciliation, because guess what? Esau didn't want to kill Jacob. Right? Esau's heart's open. Esau is forgiving Jacob. In fact, it looks like Esau already forgave Jacob. Okay. Guess what? Was it because of the gifts that Esau is forgiving Jacob? What do you guys think? I don't think it is. I don't think Esau forgives or makes reconciliation to Jacob because of the gifts that Jacob is sending. Why is Esau then opening his heart to forgive Jacob? Well, God is at work, and according to Jacob, it's a testimony. So when he sees Esau and he says, it's like seeing the face of God. Well, where else did we see the face of God? Just the night before when he wrestled with God. So what is Jacob saying? God has answered Jacob's prayer. The reason why Jacob is now making reconciliation with Esau is because God has answered Jacob's prayer, and Esau has opened his heart and wants to make reconciliation with Jacob. It really doesn't have anything to do with the gifts. So does Jacob say, okay, I'll take the gifts back now? No, of course not. He still insists, and he wants to give these gifts to his brother, and he insists so much that although Esau rejects it at first, he'll take it. But you know clearly, Jacob doesn't walk away from this chapter 33 and says, that was an awesome strategy. I'm so glad I sent group 1 ahead with gifts, and I set my family in group 2, and that's the reason why Esau opened his heart and is forgiving me. No way. Jacob walks away from chapter 33, reconciliation with Esau. It wasn't because of his strategy, it wasn't because of his gifts. It was because God was with him, and that's clearly his testimony here. Okay, nevertheless, he still wants to give his gifts to his brother. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with the gifts. But now you are not Jacob anymore. You're Israel. You are one who wrestles with God. You're not one who deceives. Okay? So that's what's going on as he's making reconciliation with Esau. And that's kind of how we need to live in this world. Fully depending on God, wrestling with God. For everything we do, every decision, every crisis that we go through, we depend on God and we seek Him. Of course, we can use our brain and we use our strategy, but we depend on God to come through more than our own efforts. Without the grace of God, our efforts don't count for anything. Okay? So that brings us to today's text. And this is where Esau says, hey, Jacob, let's go. Let's go down to Seir. And Jacob says, no, you go ahead. I'll catch up. Okay, I'll leave my men with you. No, it's okay. I'm good. You go ahead. I'll catch up. And then where does Jacob go? He doesn't go down to Seir. So what's going on? Okay, remember, they met like middle way right now. Okay? I'm going to assume, because we don't know exactly where they're meeting here, but we know that Jacob is crossing this river, right? This Jabbok River. He has to cross. And as soon as he crosses, he's meeting Esau. Okay? So they're somewhat middle way. Basically, Jacob's come down south and Esau's gone north. They met kind of probably near Canaan here. Esau's going back down to Seir. And basically Esau wants Jacob to come down with him. And what is Jacob doing? He's not doing that. He stays in Canaan. Okay? Why does he stay in Canaan? Well, because God told him to stay in Canaan. That's where he needs to go. And so when we see Jacob not going down to Seir with his brother, okay, and when you see him going to Succoth and settling there, and then moving to Shechem and settling there, and actually there he buys the land, right? And he's actually really settling his family there, right? And what does he do? He worships, right? He's building an altar. And he actually calls the place El Elohe Israel, which means God of Israel or God the Almighty. It could mean either way. But he's building an altar and he's worshiping there because that's where God told him to go, and that's where the promise is. Right? That's where Jacob is going. And that's absolutely why and the reason why he's going there, because that's where the promise is and that's where God tells him to go. Now what about Esau? Isn't it interesting? Like, he didn't go down to Seir. Well, my interpretation is if you look at verse 16 and 17 and 18. So Esau goes down to Seir, right? And Jacob doesn't. In verse 17, Jacob, however, went to Succoth, where he built a place for himself and made shelters for his livestock. That is why the place is called Succoth. Okay? What is he doing? He's settling. He doesn't want to settle in Seir, because he can't settle in Seir. So he's settling in Canaan. And then in verse 18, after Jacob came from Padan Aram, he arrived safely. If you look at the way verse 18 is presented, well, we already know that Jacob left Padan Aram a long time ago. Like 2 chapters ago, he left Padan Aram. Right? When he left his uncle Laban's house. So it's almost like there's something in between. We can assume that something in between verse 17 and 18. That after that reconciliation with Esau goes down to Seir. Okay? Jacob didn't go down, but he temporarily settled in Succoth. Okay? But then I'm sure that he went down to Esau because Esau's expecting Jacob to come down, right? Jacob said, I'm going to go down. Is Jacob lying? Like, Esau, I'm going to go down. And he didn't go down. Like, something happened between 17 and 18 that will allow us to think that Jacob just didn't lie to his brother. I'll go down, and he didn't go down. Either he sent a messenger and said, you know what, Esau, I think it's better for me to stay up here. Or he actually went down, not with all of his group, because he's already settling in Canaan. Either way, he's going to settle in Canaan. Right? And went down to Esau and probably had a little talk and said, you know what, you live here, I'm going to live over there. All right? We're good? Something happened between verse 17 and 18. Okay? Esau wants Jacob. It's like assume that Esau wants Jacob to live with him, right? Why do you think that is? Esau wants Jacob to live with him. It's almost assumed. Jacob says, I'll go down, but Jacob doesn't ever show a desire that he wants to live where Esau lives. He knows he has to settle in Canaan. Okay? So it's like, come, let's go to Seir. And you can kind of see Jacob no, you go ahead. He doesn't want to be like, no, I don't want to go with you. You go ahead, I'll be there. But then he knows, the whole time he knows he's going to settle in Canaan. Never once does Jacob think, I'm going to live with my brother in Seir. No, because God told him he has to live in Canaan. So he's saying, go down, and he settles in Canaan, but I'm sure that somewhere along the line, between verse 17 and 18, he either sent a messenger or he went down and told his brother, well, brother Esau, I don't think I should live here with you. I'm going to live in Canaan. I'm sure he did that. And the reason I say that in assumption is there's a break between 17 and 18. After Esau goes down to Seir, he kind of temporarily settles down in Succoth. But then verse 18 is like a summary of this, of what's been happening. Jacob ends up settling not in Succoth, but where does he really settle? In Shechem. That's where he builds altar and that's where he buys the land. So he's really settling in Shechem as his home in Canaan after leaving Uncle Laban's house. It's not Succoth. Succoth is a temporary stay before he gets to Shechem. So something happened between 17 and 18. Either he sent messengers to Esau or he went down to Seir and told Esau that he's going to live in Canaan. But never did Jacob change his mind about settling in Canaan. Okay? Now, remember remember what Esau was supposed to do? Esau was supposed to actually live with Jacob. He's supposed to serve the younger brother, right? So it's really, this is how the story is working. Esau still wants Jacob to come down to Seir. Right? But Jacob's not going to do that. Why? Because God had told him you have to live in the promised land, Canaan. Esau is supposed to really go up to where Jacob lives and live with Jacob. Now Jacob's not going to ask his brother to do that. But Esau's supposed to do that. That's how Esau can really be blessed. Because Esau was told that you're going to serve his younger brother. That's why during discipleship a couple of weeks ago I had us read chapter 36, verse 6 and 7. Chapter 36, verse 6 and 7. Esau took his wives and sons and daughters and all the members of his household, as well as his livestock and all his other animals and all the goods he had acquired in Canaan, and moved to a land some distance from his brother Jacob. Their possessions were too great for them to remain together. The land where they were staying could not support them both because of their livestock. So Esau, that is Edom, settled in the hill country of Seir. In chapter 36, where we're looking at the genealogy or the summary of Esau's family line, you see that Esau didn't stay with Jacob and he actually moved away from Canaan down to Seir. That's how it's summarizing. Okay? So it's not come to Seir, it's more I'm going to go where you are. And Jacob doesn't get hindered in any way. He knows he has to stay in Canaan. Right? It's like Lot. Sodom and Gomorrah, you should have stuck with your uncle Abraham, but you decide to live in Sodom and Gomorrah, and look what happened to you, right? And so that's how I kind of want to see the story from that perspective. Application for us is this. I think when God commands us to do something, and when God gives us a promise, right, we can't be hindered by anything. Even the closest people, even our family, even if it means kind of hurting them. You have to do what God tells you to do. I mean, I think this is a clear example of when Jesus is telling us, if you're going to follow me, you got to kind of say no to your family too. So when Esau's like, hey, come down to Seir, I think for Jacob to say, I'll go down, but in the end, he's making sure that he's not going to go down. You know? Why? Because he has to stay in Canaan. Okay, so two applications from everything that I said today. One is, we have to use our brain to come up with ways that we can survive in this world, such as Jacob coming up with this little strategy to make reconciliation with Esau. But in the end, you need to pray, you need to wrestle with God and depend on God. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. That's Jacob's testimony. His testimony from making reconciliation with Esau is not because he sent gifts ahead, came up with this wonderful plan, but it's because God answered his prayer. That's one. The second application is, if God has commanded us to do something and God has promised us, there's going to be opposition and there's going to be hindrance, even from family. In Jacob's case, it's Esau. Come down and live with me in Seir. And yet Jacob's able to, throw that away because he knows what God has promised him. And that's what we need to do. Sometimes we are swayed. God says, live in Canaan. But if our brother tells us, come down to Seir, what should I do? It's clear what we should do. Right? It's clear what we should do. And Jacob is doing what he's supposed to do, and that's what we need to do too. Okay, let's pray.